Building cicd process for Azure Data Factory is not quite straightforward. Furthermore, there's a few different methods of doing that. Before we begin doing that, we must set up Git repository associated to ADF, understand what's the differences between save and publish, and why new branch appears. The basic knowledge of ARM templates also would be beneficial. During this video, I will explain one of the methods recommended by Microsoft. In the previous episode, we created Azure Data Factory and one pipeline that was responsible for copying binary files from blob storage to the same blob storage but in different location. To do that, also we configured the Azure Key Vault to get the key from there and using it in connection to ADLS. That was the latest changes we did. So now, as you can see in Azure Data Factory, we have one pipeline with copy data activity, and we are copying one or more files in binary method. And we have two connections. One is to Azure Key Vault and one is to Azure Data Lake Storage. And in Azure Data Lake Storage connection, we are using Azure Key Vault pointer to get the passwords, to get the account key. Okay, let's have a look on the code, because our Azure Data Factory is connected to master branch in Git repo, and as you can see here, we have dataset folder with datasets and with our one pipeline. Everything is in code repository. And right now we have only one branch. I'm currently working on the master, which is not the best practice, but this is only for demo purposes. In a second, I will show you that another branch will be created when we publish our changes. So let's do it right now. So now Azure Data Factory portal will show us what has been changed since the last time. Okay, we're clicking OK button, and ADF will do two things. Firstly, create or update ADF publish branch in the Git repository, and also publish those changes to the publish instance of ADF. Let's refresh list of the branches, and as you can see, there's new branch here, ADF publish, created by ADF. Let's have a look what is inside that branch. As you can see, we have one folder which is the name of our ADF and other objects which we'll use for our deployment. So let's create the new build pipeline in Azure DevOps to just collect all the files that we need for deployment. So we'll be publishing the code from the ADF publish branch, and what we need to do here is only one step. Basically, we need to publish those files and pack them as an artifact. We are going to the agent job, adding the new step. In our case, it will be publish artifact, the Microsoft one, and by clicking adding, we have the template. Let's choose the folder that we are interested in and clicking OK. Also, you can configure the triggers to automatically run the build pipeline when we change something in ADF publish branch in specific path. Let's change a little bit the name of this build pipeline and save it. Also save it and run the process, which will run all the tasks on the agent job and create the artifact. And few seconds later, we've got the artifact. Now let's go to releases and create new release pipeline, which will be responsible to deploy all the changes to Azure Data Factory. And because we have and should have a few environments, we can create new environment right now. Let's say UAT, some test environments, because our dev environment already exists. Do you remember our build pipeline and artifact created by it? So now we are selecting the artifact and the build pipeline so that here we can reuse it, all the files generated and packed in there. So you might wonder why we don't have dev environment here to deployment. So the answer is simple. Dev environment is already exist, and Azure Data Factory during the publish action already does it. So we don't need to duplicate the efforts and overwrite the same service with Azure DevOps. So first task we would like to do is basically create new instance of Azure Data Factory if that doesn't exist. So for our agent job group, we're going to create new task, which will be Azure PowerShell task. Let's choose the Azure subscription. And my inline script will be like one single, simple, one line of code of PowerShell. So first step will be responsible for creating Azure resource group if that one doesn't exist. So that's why I'm using the new AZ resource group here of PowerShell module, and I'm passing the name and location from the variable. I will create those variables in a minute. So the one line will be like this, and the second line would be to create the new Azure Data Factory if that doesn't exist as well. Let's comment it out. And please remember that this is only one of the simplest way how to create the object in Azure. If you need to create more sophisticated objects in Azure for services, obviously you can use the file script from Artifact. As you can see here, I'm creating in the second command Azure Data Factory v2 to the same resource group, giving a name like Data Factory name from variable and the same location as above. Azure PowerShell version, I'm going to use the latest one, and basically we created our first step in deployment pipeline. Now let's give a bit better name for this release pipeline, very similar to the previous one but with cd at the end. Save it to the Data Factory folder and we can test it and run for our UAT environment. But before we do it, we need to create obviously variables because now we don't have any. So we use the resource group name variable. So in my case, it would be, because it will be separate environment, UAT environment, I would like to give a new name for this resource group and create new resource group from scratch. Similar thing for Data Factory name and location. Bear in mind that in scope column you can choose between release or specific stage. Stage in this case is environment. So if you choose the specific scope other than release, you can create many of these cases specifically for particular stage. This is very useful and you can keep all the information in one place. Again, let's save it and create our first release to test if it works. So when this release finish, we should have newly created resource group and Azure Data Factory completely empty instance. And we can follow what is going on during this deployment and take a look which particular step has been finished or if any errors happens. Let's go back to Azure portal, and as you can see, our resource groups has been created, and also we have newly created Azure Data Factory. Let's double check what is in there, and I would expect completely empty Azure Data Factory with no objects. As you can see here, there's no objects inside. Okay, first thing's done. Let's go to our release pipeline again and edit it and extend with another task. So the second task would be responsible for deploying all the objects for Azure Data Factory. So I'm adding a second task, and in this case it is Azure Resource Group Deployment. This task allows me to deploy ARM template that I already have in my ADF publish branch. I will use these files to deploy everything to my target Azure Data Factory. So for template location, I need to find out one main file, which is RM template for factory JSON, and template parameters, very similar. This is the second file which we need. Okay, that's almost all. The other very important things is to override some parameters. So we have some parameters in the parameter files template, but what is important, we need to replace some variables for these parameters because we want to deploy our Azure Data Factory to another environment. So that's why we want to keep everything isolated from each other. So I'm using the variable for Data Factory name. And also for my key vault, I haven't created new key vault in my UAT environment. So for this demo purposes, I will do it manually, but obviously you can create some tasks here to create it automatically before you use this in Azure Data Factory. So we need to create Azure Key Vault with that name because it will be for UAT environment. So we need to add the new variable. And similar thing is about storage account. So in this case, we need to replace storage account URL. Let's copy that from the existing one, just changing the few letters related to the environment. So I'm going to use Azure CLI to create new key vault and new storage account. So this is the statement I need to execute. AZ key vault create name, resource group, and location. Pretty simple, isn't it? After a few seconds, the new empty key vault should be created. And I'm going to do the same for Azure storage account. As you can see, similar command. Obviously you can find all the information in Microsoft documentation page, which I will provide the link to in the description to this video. Okay, everything is fine. When we refresh, we already have Azure Key Vault and storage account for UAT environment. That's fine. All the variables has been created. And now it's time to replace parameters with created variables. So I have already done it for factory name, ADLS, and for Azure Key Vault as well. The deployment mode is important to keep it as incremental. Okay, we have updated our release pipeline, so let's test it and check how the process works. So let's create new release, and the new release should basically omit deploying Azure Data Factory because it already exists, but should deploy all the objects stored in the code. So as you can see, we have currently we have no objects in Azure Data Factory, but release is in progress. So in a few seconds, all the objects should be deployed to our existing empty Azure Data Factory in UAT environment. As you can see, we created new development using two files, two ARM templates. And if we refresh the Azure Data Factory portal, we can see all the objects in there. Checking the configuration, like link services and pointers, we can see that the URL to Azure Key Vault is pointing to the right URL environment service. And also the same for link service to Azure Data Lake Storage. Let's check the connection and click on test connection. This is failed because we didn't grant the permission for Azure Data Factory in UAT environment to Azure Key Vault. Again, we could do this by release pipeline, but this is not our goal during this video, so I'm going to grant this permission manually, as we done it previously for dev environment. Okay, let's do not forget that we need to create the secret key in our Azure Key Vault, because this is completely new environment. So I'm going to create the secret key and copy and paste the value for it from the key of Azure Data Lake Storage. Very quickly, we need to find out Azure Data Factory block UAT. This is my name of this ADF, which is our service principal. Grant the permission for get and list, and that's it. The test should be fine right now. Connection successful. We are sure that we deployed our Azure Data Factory correctly. Let's do the last test and run the pipeline in this Azure Data Factory. Before we do that, we need to just copy some CSV files that have been presented in our dev environment, but we created the new blob storage from scratch in our UAT environment, so that's why you need to copy those files again. This work also you can automate it with Azure Key Vault if needed. Okay, this time I'm copying only one file because this is just for test to make sure that file is moving, the file is copying to the new location. So now we can run the Azure Data Factory pipeline in debug mode. Process has been finished, and as you can see, one file has been read. And in our output location, also the one file is present. Okay, wonderful. Our first deployment for Azure Data Factory has been created and successfully run. So now let's have a look on ADF publish branch, what it contains and basically what it does mean for us. So there's a ARM template parameters for factory, which contains all the parameters we can replace during the deployment using the override parameters. Okay. So that's why in this override template parameters, we use these variables here to have more flexible way to provide our values. This is the simplest way how you can deploy Azure Data Factory from ADF publish, and the ADF publish branch should be always your source code that you are deploying from. I'm not trying to say that this approach is perfect, but at least I wanted to show you something at the beginning. In the next videos, I will show you how to do it in different way and maybe a bit more sophisticated way and avoid some issues that you can face using this approach. Wonderful. At the end of this video, let's check how the process works, and so to test it, let's make a simple change in our Azure Data Factory on dev environment. So I'm going to add some description into my pipeline in dev environment, and let's save it. So what the portal does right now, it's committing the changes to the Git repository, and now we are publishing it. And as you can see, all those changes are ready to go and ready to publish. That means those changes will be published to the IDF publish branch, not only to our current master collaboration branch. Okay, and because we configured previously a trigger for build pipeline, the build pipeline, as you can see here, has been triggered automatically because of this publish, because of this push to ADF publish branch. After a few seconds, the new artifact will be created, which contains RM templates and RM templates parameters. Let's go to the repository branches and files, and when we check the history, as you can see, the last change is visible here. Let's go to release pipelines now and create new release to deploy all the changes or the latest changes of Azure Data Factory to other environments, to basically promote the changes to higher environments, which in our case is only UAT. As you can see now, still the description is empty because a release is still undergoing. But in few seconds or maybe minute, when the last task will be finished, all the changes should be deployed to our UAT ADF. 21 seconds for checking if the resource group and IDF services exists, and another 17 seconds for deployment ADF changes. Let's go to our pipeline and copy activity. As you can see, the comment has been added in this instance of Azure Data Factory. You have learned one of the ways to development changes in Azure Data Factory with Azure DevOps. But what if you have a way more parameters or case when a variable or specific property of an object doesn't appear in template parameter file? That topic is for next video or blog post. Was that video helpful for you? If so, click thumb up or subscribe button down below, and see you next time.